Hello and welcome to Hot Topics in Hypnotherapy. My name is George Kappas and I'll be your host today on the show that explores new ideas, interesting people, and important developments in the field of hypnotherapy. Today we're going to talk about hypnosis and the law, and specifically Florida law. We have two guests. Our first guest is Bruce Bonnett, president of the Hypnotherapists Union, Harvard Law graduate and HMI graduate. And then we have from Florida, from the Florida Institute of Hypnotherapy, Matthew Brownstein. And he'll be joining us via Skype. Let's welcome Matthew.
Well, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's start with you. Why don't you kind of take us to the beginning of how Bruce and you first began interacting and bring us up to date. What's going on there in Florida?
Sure. Bruce had emailed me because of basically misinterpretations of Florida law. And I can go back just a little bit. When I moved to Florida into the city of Gainesville and applied for my occupational license, it was the city itself that had a misunderstanding of that law. And I wrote them a letter explaining the occupation of hypnotherapy and the interpretation of Florida law as I read it. As soon as they had read that, they said, no problem, granted me the occupational license. Since then, having opened a school and being a significant presence in the state of Florida, I keep hearing about other troubles with occupational licenses in other cities and counties. I believe Bruce heard about this too, and then contacted me.
Okay, so it started with a graduate of your school, your Florida Institute of Hypnotherapy. A graduate went to get their license after graduation, and they were denied. Is that correct?
I don't know exactly when it started. The person that Bruce contacted me about is actually not a graduate of our school,
okay.
So I don't know who this is. We weren't able to help them.
This was somebody that brought it to our attention.
Before Bruce contacted me, we had a graduate who went to their county, and the county denied the occupational license. They called me, and we wrote a letter directly to that county. And they came back with, in quotes, profuse apologies for misunderstanding the law. And the graduate was granted her occupational title, or license. The other person that Bruce first contacted me about, I'm really not aware of who that is.
All right, so Bruce, who contacted you and why did they contact you?
It was just an independent hypnotherapist who was having trouble getting their occupational license. They went to the tax assessor's office or county office to get a business license. And the person in charge said, no, sorry, if you're not a licensed doctor or chiropractor or dentist or something like that, we can't grant it. This therapist didn't know where to turn, so he turned to our union and said, can you help me, or do you know anything about this? That's when I contacted Matthew to see what else was happening in Florida.
So since then, Matthew, has any of your other graduates had any difficulties getting approval to operate?
We have had some people who, because of, I believe it's only 3 counties, only 2 where our graduates are in, that have had this, again, I'll say misinterpretation of the law. One gentleman, because of the interpretation, actually had to find a physician who would vouch to be supervising him, and he was able to go into practice. Another graduate was able to work out of a holistic healing center, and under the occupational title of his center, was able to practice. Yet up to this point, we haven't had a graduate who wasn't able to somehow get into practice. Yet obviously the misinterpretation of the law is bringing a concern to Bruce and to myself.
So Bruce, what does the law in Florida actually say?
What the law says is that if you're doing hypnosis for therapeutic purposes, then you have to be a licensed healing arts practitioner, meaning a licensed doctor, psychotherapist, dentist, chiropractor, optometrist, that sort of thing. Or you have to be operating under that kind of person's supervision and referral. The question is, what does the word therapeutic mean?
Right.
In my view, they wouldn't have used the word therapeutic unless there were non-therapeutic purposes, and there has to be something else hypnotherapists can be doing. I think it's all the stuff we normally do in terms of helping people stop smoking and perform sports better and get ready for exams and public speaking, all those kind of things.
Therapeutic implying, in your interpretation, then some sort of disorder, like a psychological medical disorder, would be therapeutic purposes. Something that doesn't qualify as disorder would then be, under your interpretation, non-therapeutic.
Right. And it seems like the legislative intent that's in the language of the statute itself sort of lends itself to that position.
So it comes down to legislative intent. You believe that the intent of the law is a difference between therapeutic and non-therapeutic use.
Right.
Is there anything to substantiate that?
Well, if you look at the law itself, the first two sections, the first one talks about how hypnosis can be helpful in treating human illness and injury and disease, which seems to imply that that's the kind of thing that they're trying to regulate. The second section of the law talks about using hypnosis for hypnoanalgesia. And that all makes sense to me. If you're going to use hypnosis to help a cancer patient, you want that patient to be seeing a doctor.
Right.
If you're using hypnoanesthesia because someone's going to the dentist, it makes sense to have a dentist involved. It doesn't necessarily make sense to have a doctor or chiropractor or optometrist overseeing a hypnotherapist helping someone give a speech.
Right. Or better at Little League or whatnot.
Right, exactly.
Right. So, in Matthew, what this comes down to is like here in California a number of years ago, we had a similar issue where the law didn't change, the wording didn't change, but someone in our Department of Consumer Affairs decided to interpret it in a different way, in their own way. And the argument is, what was the intent when the law was written? So what do we have to support the intent that there is such a thing as non-therapeutic hypnosis that doesn't need medical supervision? Either one of you. Anything that you believe supports that position?
My experience is, since there are so many non-therapeutic applications, I'm not exactly sure how to answer the question. I can say from our school, we work with scope of practice assessment to help our graduates to see when is it therapeutic, when is it non-therapeutic, when is it medical, when is it non-medical, and to clearly align ourselves with the intent of that law, which is to protect the consumer, to protect someone who does clearly need medical or therapeutic intervention, and then for us to be able to practice the free and open practice of hypnotherapy without having to consult with somebody who's considered a licensed practitioner of the healing arts.
And now, Bruce, you actually found an attorney in Florida who defended a hypnotherapist and supported your assumption as well. Tell us about that.
Well, Matthew may be able to fill us more in about this, but I came across something on the internet that referred to an attorney in Florida who had defended hypnotherapists under some of the early test cases under this law or predecessor law, who subsequently became a judge. And I tried to contact this judge. He'd been in trial. We kept missing each other, and since Matthew's in Florida, I suggested Matthew try to reach him.
And did you, Matthew?
Yes, I was able to speak to him directly, and he was quite nice as far as his willingness to take time to speak with me. He said that he's surprised the issue came up again because the same counties we were mentioning had somehow reverted back to the old misinterpretation of the law. He said he fully supports the point of view that we're taking here in this program, where we're saying there's obviously in the legislative intent a reason to have therapeutic and non-therapeutic, or it wouldn't have been mentioned. He said in the cases that he had to deal with, he literally, as an attorney before he became a judge, flew to those different cities and or counties and actually had the practitioner sign an affidavit in front of a notary that said, I will only practice non-therapeutic, non-medical hypnosis on my own, and if it became something, if a client came in for a therapeutic or medical condition, then clearly they would go to the proper licensed practitioner of the healing arts. The judge was interpreting this exactly the way we are. He said he can't give advice as a judge, but he can tell me of his past experience. And he said every time this came up, it was never a problem to change the interpretation of the county and to grant the occupational license.
Okay.
I also think that, unfortunately, there's not a definition of therapeutic in the law. But if you look at standard dictionary definitions, for the most part, they talk about relating to medical conditions and illnesses, that sort of thing. So it's a common definition.
So what do you think is in other words, everyone, we're here in California, we have people all over the United States, and even though it's a local issue in Florida at the moment, we're concerned about precedents being set, and any restrictions in any state we feel affects all of us and threatens all of us. What do you think is really should be done here, Bruce?
Well, I think the key, and I think maybe the judge had suggested this to Matthew, was the counties were having trouble with trying to educate them first, see if we can't convince them otherwise. I had found out it seems like the Assistant Attorney General in Florida had issued something, an email or something, that tended to misapply the law or misinterpret it. Now, when I contacted the Attorney General's office, they wrote back and said, we have no official opinion about this. But I think there's some message getting down through the ranks to the counties that some counties are misapplying the law.
Okay. And now, how many union members do you have in Florida?
We just have a handful right now.
Okay. So I think sort of one of the things we're considering is whether or not we could possibly get, Matthew, some more union members in Florida and have a union presence there, and, and have sort of speak from a unified voice, and maybe even have some union representatives, talk to maybe some of the people in the county there.
Right. Right, and because we're affiliated with the Office of Professionals Workers Union, which is about 100,000, and we're affiliated with the AFL-CIO, they have professional lobbyists in all the different states that could help potentially.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to continue talking with Matthew Brownstein from the Florida Institute of Hypnotherapy and Bruce Bonnett, President of Hypnotherapists Union, about Florida law and just the future of our legislative freedom. So stay tuned. Brownstein, and he'll be joining us via Skype. So let's welcome Matthew.
Well, thank you. My pleasure to be here.
All right, so let's start with you. Why don't you kind of take us to the beginning of how Bruce and you first began interacting, and bring us up to date. What's going on there in Florida?
Sure. Bruce had a letter explaining the occupation of hypnotherapy and the interpretation of Florida law as I read it. As soon as they had read that, they said, no problem, granting me the occupational license. Since then, having opened a school and being a significant presence in the state of Florida, I keep hearing about other troubles with that. They had emailed me because of basically misinterpretations of Florida law. And I can go back just a little bit. When I moved to Florida into the city of Gainesville and applied for my occupational license, it was the city itself that had a misunderstanding of that law. And I wrote them.
Hello and welcome to Hot Topics in Hypnotherapy. My name is George Kappas, and I'll be your host today on the show that explores new ideas, interesting people, and important developments in the field of hypnotherapy. Today we're going to talk about hypnosis in the law, and specifically Florida law. We have two guests. Our first guest is Bruce Bonnett, President of the Hypnotherapists Union, Harvard Law graduate and HMI graduate. And then we have from Florida, from the Florida Institute of Hypnotherapy, Matthew